Hello. Today, I will be examining exactly what martial law is. What is it? What does it mean? What powers does it give? And what the hell does it have to do with South Korea? Just for the record, I'm not a lawyer, so just keep that in mind while watching the video. I'm going to mostly focus on martial law in the US, but most countries have some form of it. In general, martial law is less of an established rule in the Constitution or an official law, but is instead a practice done by governments when in crisis. If a president declares martial law, they are essentially giving full authority to the military, and since the president is the commander-in-chief, they are also giving themselves full authority. This declaration can nullify any civilian governments and laws, which means on a national level, Congress, the Supreme Court, hell, even the Constitution, and all the laws made by Congress could be completely powerless. However, in practice, it usually doesn't do this. The president or whomever is in charge of the military would have complete authority to do whatever they wanted. Enact any laws they want, throw anybody in prison for any reason, invade any country they want, all with the enforcement power of the military behind them. Technically speaking, martial law is kind of allowed under the Constitution. One big area of concern when talking about martial law is the writ of habeas corpus, which is the right to challenge one's incarceration. The Constitution specifically states that the writ of habeas corpus cannot be suspended unless there is active rebellion or invasion. Lincoln used martial law during the Civil War to suspend habeas corpus, and Bush Jr. suspended it for the 9/11 terrorists. Although Bush did not use martial law, he used his emergency powers. Now, while martial law is technically allowed under the Constitution, it does have some restrictions. The Supreme Court has ruled on martial law before, saying that it cannot be imposed in areas where the civil courts are functioning. In addition, the 1878 Posse Comitatus Act restricts the use of martial law unless Congress allows it. In theory, the president could use martial law, but unless there are really dire circumstances, it would likely be found unconstitutional. However, as I'll explain later, this whole obeying the Constitution part may not be as necessary as one might think. So quick recap. Martial law is less of an actual law and more of a general practice done by presidents and leaders in which they take direct control over the military to enforce whatever they need to. Now, in the famous words of Jontron, you could do that. You could. But why? Why would you do that? Well, there are basically two types of reasons. The first type of reason, when shit has officially hit the fan. This is by far the most common reason. If a foreign enemy attacks, such as the attack on Pearl Harbor, martial law may be declared to get direct enforcement on anything that needs to be done, such as securing the safety of the population and stabilizing the situation. Or when a major natural disaster hits, such as an earthquake. In fact, many times martial law has been declared by local governments. In 1878, there was a huge fire in Chicago, and the mayor declared a form of martial law and put a general in charge of the city until the fires had been put out. Then, a few days later, the law was lifted, and the regular government was reinstated. This is the best use for martial law, as it allows quick, decisive actions from one official in charge instead of waiting around for committees and congresses and the bureaucracy to fix the problem. It's actually kind of related to the idea of the presidency. The president is one person in charge, and therefore, when shit hits the fan, they can make quick and decisive actions to get the country stabilized. However, there is another reason for declaring martial law: establishing a dictatorship. You see, while many local governments will use martial law to help with natural disasters, and sometimes the national government will use it to stabilize the country, some people have realized that having direct control over the military basically means having direct control over the country. And some of those people have then used martial law to install themselves as dictators. Let's run through an example. You're the president, but you're kind of unpopular right now. There are nationwide protests against you for a variety of reasons. The next election is coming up, and you are either constitutionally unable to run for office, or you can run but will probably lose. You have a few options. Change course politically and attempt to do some popular things to get reelected, or stay the course and accept defeat gracefully. Just having to accept that the country doesn't see eye to eye with you anymore. Nah, I'm just kidding. You're going to declare martial law. So you declare martial law. In the declaration, you restrict people's freedom of speech, suspend any rights to habeas corpus, ban public assembly to get rid of those pesky protesters, bar whatever Congress or National Assembly you have from meeting so they won't have any power to stop you, and then enforce all of these nice new rules with the military. Throw anybody in prison who dares oppose you, and there you go. You have now taken, in a very short period of time, a functioning democracy and turned it into a military dictatorship where you have absolute power. Congrats! This has happened quite a few times throughout history. The president will typically mask their martial law through emergency powers, and then use that emergency, real or not, to take over. Hitler did it with Germany. In the 70s, Ferdinand Marcos did it with the Philippines. And in 2024, it almost happened to South Korea. President Yoon Suk-yeol declared martial law. His reasoning was alleged threats from North Korea. There's the made-up emergency masking the true intentions. Although this emergency was probably fairly credible, as Kimmy likes to test his nukes. Yoon then suspended many civil liberties, like protesting, and restricted the media. He also blocked the National Assembly from convening and used the military to enforce it all. However, unfortunately for Yoon, the National Assembly quickly convened and nullified the declaration. And later, under pressure from the people of South Korea and many foreign leaders, Yoon would rescind the declaration himself. He was later impeached and then arrested. This is the thing with martial law. It's kind of like a gentle coup. On the surface, there's still the presidency, the legislature, and the judiciary. However, underneath, everything is being controlled by the military, and therefore the president. However, in our day of instant communication and knowledge, it would be very difficult to pull off a coup like this in a developed, stable nation. Alright, let's talk about the orange elephant in the room. In my last video, I talked about the different ways Trump could run for a third term as president. I did not talk about martial law, because it basically dismantles the government and installs a dictator. Trump could definitely try to do what President Yoon did, and it might work a little bit better. Trump still has a decent portion of MAGA civilians on his side, who would probably not mind living under King Trump. And Trump has installed loyalists all throughout the government. He's going to need those loyalists, such as the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, if he wants to pull off a coup. Never mind that half of these loyalists are not qualified. The only thing they need on their resume is a picture of them kissing Trump's ass. Trump could declare a state of emergency and cancel all elections, and prevent Congress from doing anything, all with the enforcement of the military. I still doubt it would work. It would receive condemnation from a lot of people, foreign leaders, many people in Congress and the states. Hell, probably a lot of Republicans might even oppose this. But the most problematic thing for Trump is the military. If they don't go along with the plan, Trump is screwed. Everything hinges on the military obeying Trump's commands. And if they don't, he's done for. He would almost certainly get impeached and be removed from office. So to answer the question, what is martial law? It is a practice that is generally used by presidents and leaders when there is a crisis to make decisive actions to ensure the safety and stability of the country. It is also sometimes used by some to install themselves as dictators.